It seems like such a long time since I've done a sober life story. So today I'm really excited to welcome Christina Kimbrough onto my channel to talk about her story as she approaches 1 whole year without alcohol. So without further ado, let's bring her on. Tell me a bit what life was like when you were drinking before you quit and what it was that
Sure.
led you to start thinking about quitting
Yeah,
alcohol.
I love that question. So I think I heard you said you started at like 14. Mine was interesting. I grew up in a pretty strict household and I was the special one. No one in my family drank, so I'm not really sure where that came from. But I started drinking probably like in college, a little after, and then mine progressed after there. I'm 32, and I quit when I was 31. And I would say I started trying to quit for like 2 years or so. And I was like you, I just had many day ones, just stopping, starting. And I'm in the US, I think I mentioned, but so I tried AA and I was like in and out of the rooms and I was drinking a lot. Um, and so I hit my bottom a year ago. I got a really good new job and I showed up to the job drunk, and it
Right.
was, yeah, I worked in politics. So it was high stress, high stakes, like not good. Right. And then after that, I went on a binge. I had never been on a binge before. I had never done that, and I just did some things that I regret and like that were scary, like very out of character for me. And so my husband was like, you need help. Like he didn't threaten me by any means. We have a great relationship, but he was like, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like you're out of control. Because he'd have to come pick me up at the bars at 2 a.m. I mean, it was bad. So I finally was like, I don't know how to stop. And he was drinking too, that's his own story, but we would just quit and start and quit and
Yeah.
start. And it was just not good. So I finally was like, you know what, like we need to separate, not legally, we don't have kids. I mean, I had the privilege of that. And I want to be a mom someday. I really do. And I don't want to be a drunk mom. Like I don't, that my children don't deserve that. And so I went home to Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I'm from originally. I live in Virginia right now, right outside of DC, like south of DC. And I went home for like 9 months and I lived with my grandma, who's one of those strange people who's had like one drink in her life. I can't even imagine. And I kept drinking there because your addiction it follows you. I don't. I think I remember thinking like, oh, I'll get out of this situation, it'll stop. It didn't, because I was still craving it, all the obsession, all the things. And my last drink, I'll never forget. I was at just kind of like you guys, I don't know if you know what Applebee's is. It's just like a regular family joint,
Yeah,
like where
yeah, I
you,
know it. Yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah. And so I went to the classiest establishments to drink. But anyway, I was there and it had gotten to the point where I didn't have a debit card anymore. My family had taken my keys because I was just drunk driving. I agreed to all of this to get help, but that's how bad it was for me. And I had like I was in AA and I would this is embarrassing but kind of funny. You have to laugh at yourself, I think. I they would give donations, right, in AA, and I would ask my girl, hey, can I have a couple bucks, just give to the basket because I didn't have my debit card. And I would just hoard that money for like weeks. And so I had maybe $10 and went to a happy hour, got like 3 or 4 beers, and then flirted with the guy down the bar to get me more beer. And my family, I have an iPhone, and my family would track me. I mean, this is how crazy our disease, or I call it, gets, right? When you're in active addiction, me. And my family, I had lied and said I was at a coffee shop, and my grandma just walked in and was like, hey, can we go home? And the guy sitting next to me was like, oh, does she want a drink?
Yeah.
I was
Oh
like,
my God.
no, she does not. And she was so gracious to me, so gracious. And I was exhausted. I'm sure maybe you can relate to that. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this, like I just don't. And so I went home with her, hung over the next day, and I got into treatment right away. I did an outpatient, which was amazing. And, you know, I say that place saved my life because we had to take drug tests. And I was like, I'd never done drugs, but I was like, I have to take a drug test. You know, I had to pee in a cup in front of someone. And for me, that was so humbling. You know, I had reached this point where like nobody believed me, so that I literally had to, before each session, a couple times a week, I had to go pee in a cup, right? You know, and I remember I had wanted to drink, and that was the whole time, at least for the first month, and that was the only thing that kept me sober, because I knew I needed to be there, but if you tested positive, they would kick you out. And so I did that, and then for like 8 weeks, and then COVID hit. The week I ended, what was it called? Oh yeah, treatment. And so luckily for me, all the bars were shut down, so that was good because I was a big bar fly. So I got lucky in that, you know, I'm trying to be cognizant because I know a lot of businesses are suffering, but for me it was good, at least in early sobriety. But yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. And then I decided to make the move back home because I felt good in sobriety back in September of this year. So
That's
I'm doing
amazing.
good. Yeah,
What a
thank you.
story. And
Yeah.
when you're coming up a year in
February
February.
3rd of this year, or
Awesome.
2021. Yeah.
That's
Crazy, right?
amazing.
Yeah. So this is great. Thank you for letting me share my story. Because I think, you know, so I have been working as a micro influencer and as a blogger. It's crazy. Like my engagement spiked, and you know, I shared at a month sober. And I know a lot of people don't do that because it's early on in sobriety. And I've done a couple interviews, and people were like, why did you do that? And I said, that's a great question. And I was like, you know, because one, getting sober in COVID's nuts. Like that, I've listened to some of your interviews about like it spiked and so many people are drinking more, which makes sense, you know. And so I was like, I kind of want to show people like you can do this, like it's possible, you know. And
Yeah.
and then yeah, and then the other thing was I'm very active on sober Instagram and all of that. And I had just seen that like lots of people had lots of time in sobriety, which was awesome and super inspiring. But I was like, you know, I have a week, I have a month, I have 2 months. Like, I don't relate to the people that are 10 or 15 years in their sobriety, heck, even 5 years or a year. So I kind of just documented just what worked for me. I'm a big runner. I think I saw you run lots of marathons. And so, yeah, here I
Yeah,
am.
and it's a great thing to do as well. I think it's an accountability tool at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm very open to like, and so it's interesting. I was a speaker just locally, and then using Instagram to talk about mental health. I have generalized anxiety and bipolar. And it's interesting. I was being vulnerable and authentic, and all the while drinking. I would, you know, give a speech and then go drink and black out, you know. And so it was just like living these double lives. And, you know, I had a small following, and I was like, you know what? I'm not being authentic with my audience. Like, this is not, you know. And so, yeah, and it was partly not, I don't know if you'd call it selfish, but it was kind of like, yeah, I mean, I'm accountable to these people. They're following my journey. I think you get invested because it's like a story, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And yeah, and so I would mark my journey. I did, you know, I'd post it a month and 6 months and 9 months, and I'll do it again, you know, in a year. And yeah, and it is a way to keep me accountable. And people would just reach out in DMs, you know, and just say like, I'm struggling, or here's someone struggling. And so I would just share what I've been doing to get sober. So
Yeah, and that's the other thing. You end up giving back to people and
yeah.
inspiring others, which your story,
Yeah.
that you're sharing right now, that's what that will do.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure.
So what's the biggest changes since, so you obviously you've quit, and as
Mhm.
a lot of people will want to know, you know,
Mhm.
what did you gain as
Mhm.
after you quit? What got better in your life? Did anything get worse? Like what
Mhm.
happened?
I love it. Well, I have to, I listened to you say in an interview, and I love this. You said you did star jacks. What is that? It's like a jumping jack or
Yeah,
whatever.
jumping star jumps. Yeah, with jumping jacks.
Yeah. I mean, I just bring that up because I was like, yeah, me too. Like for me, everything got better because, you know, I still use AA. It's worked for me. And you know, step one is unmanageability and powerlessness, and everything in my life. My sponsor, you know, had me make a list of everything that was unmanageable in my life. And I was like, oh, everything, finances, relationships, marriage, job. I couldn't work because I got to the point where my addiction was, and I ruined a reputation, like all the things. My trustworthiness was shot, you know, all that stuff. And so, yeah. And then the big one for me was anxiety. I've hospitalized myself because of anxiety. Because so for me, what happens is I have anxiety, panic attack, and then it goes to suicidal ideation. And so, all of that was happening because, it's complicated, right? But because I have a mental health diagnosis, but then because the drinking exasperates it.
Yeah,
And
right. I know the feeling. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, I think one of my favorite authors, sober, Laura McCowan's like, it's like putting gasoline to
On a
fire.
fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the absurdity and insanity of addiction. And so for me, everything improved. My anxiety, like, completely, I haven't gotten off medicine yet, just not because I'm afraid. I have never been sober on medicine. So I'm just like, I just like, let's give it the time to like work. And yeah, I mean, I virtually have no anxiety right now. I still deal with anxiety, but here's the thing, like the tools I use, meditation and running and journaling, like those weren't working when I was drinking. I mean, no surprise. So now when I do have anxiety, I can manage it.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
what exactly how I feel. It's really strange that we're talking about this because only this morning I was sat having my breakfast and I was on my own in the kitchen and I actually paused for a minute and thought, wow, there's like I haven't felt anxiety for ages.
yeah,
I wasn't even feeling it at the time. I
yep,
just thought it's so good
yeah,
not to
it's
feel
amazing.
anxiety.
It's amazing. And it's like, I really believe that. I'm like you. It's just like my whole life's different. And I know maybe it sounds cheesy, but it's like, and it's, again, I hold space for people because I know it's a crazy time. But for me, 2020 was the best year of my life. I mean, now at the same time, like, don't get me wrong, my brother got COVID, like, you know, a lot of challenges. I lost a job due to COVID, so it affected me too, just like everyone else. But it improved because my life was so awful because of alcohol. I mean, yeah, the drinking. So every aspect of my life has improved, and the anxiety. I mean, and it's amazing. You don't realize how miserable you are, at least me, because I've had a bout of anxiety and I'm like, how did I live like this? Because I would have anxiety, like my anxiety would be all day, right? Like it would just be heightened. I got to the point where driving was hard, just calling people on the phone, like just small things. Going to the store was overwhelming. And I was like, how did I live like this? And like you, I'm virtually anxiety free right now. And like I said, I think it's a combination of things, my medicine and like therapy. I'm still in therapy and all those things, but I'm like, gosh, my life is so different.
But then things like therapy, I I've got stuff that's gone on from my childhood, for
Sure,
example,
same.
and
Yep.
I would never ever have been able to have been in a place where I was stable enough to have even
Yeah.
approached therapy when I was drinking. So that for me has been the second phase of this
Yep.
journey.
Yep. 100%. And that's what I said I used 2020 to do. Those 9 months was really like, I was literally running every day. And that was good for me. I'm not doing that anymore, but it was just I don't know, it was just like a period of like just growth and change and healing. Yeah. And I healed trauma. I'm a childhood survivor of abuse, like a lot of stuff. And I had never had the time or taken the time to heal that stuff, but you can't when you're drunk, right? Like I always said, for me, I wasn't drinking every day because my hangovers were so bad. I drank and spend the whole next day in bed or, throwing
Yeah,
up, all that fun stuff. But you're either drunk or you're hungover. So when the heck, and you're in like survival mode, and
yeah.
when I say you, I don't mean you, but like
Well,
me,
I
but
was
like,
too. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I think our experience is like,
they're pretty similar. But
yeah,
I could never feel feelings.
yeah.
And even recently, like I had a bit of a breakthrough around not feeling anger. Like I rarely
Mm,
feel angry, and
mhm.
I explored it through some therapy and realized actually whenever anger starts to rise in me, I bite down
Mhm.
on it with sadness.
Yeah,
So I become sad.
yeah.
And I learned that actually some people have it the other way, where when they feel sadness coming up, they get angry to stop the
Mhm,
sadness.
mhm.
And I realized I sort of was made at a young age to
Yeah,
feel that anger, what it wasn't safe to express anger around my
100%.
parents.
Same. Yeah, that's so interesting. I actually had that experience too. I had a parent who had like an anger issue. That's where some of the abuse came, and like punching walls, breaking computers, like stuff like that. So for me, I saw anger as dangerous. You know what I
Right.
mean? So for me, it was just like, and a therapist had me help. That was recently, in the last 9 months, make that breakthrough. And it was interesting. She would tell me, she's like, are you actually anxious or are you angry? And I was
Yeah,
like,
exactly
oh
that.
my God. And, and it was just like, well, I mean, sure, I have anxiety, but there were a lot of things I was angry about. I was angry that why me? Like, why do I have to struggle with anxiety? Why do I have to struggle with a drinking problem? Why did I have to grow up the way I did? And like, once I addressed that stuff, I think, I mean, processing it now probably has to do with why my anxiety is lessened too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's great comfort and peace just in acceptance that,
Yeah.
the past happened.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Just like you, I suffered abuse. I suffered sexual abuse at the hands of
Mm,
an older teenage boy. My
mm,
father abandoned me. I mean, I've talked about it loads,
mm-hmm.
in the hope of kind of showing other people that it's
Yeah.
okay to talk about this stuff.
Sure. Sure.
But the only time I started to find peace was when I started verbalizing it, bringing it out into the light, and B, when I started to just accept that that's
Yeah.
the way things were. It doesn't mean I agree with it. I just accept it happened.
Love that. Well put. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's called like radical acceptance. And that's how I got. And like, I love sharing my story too, because my parents and I just had a rocky relationship, all the things, and we've healed it. Like in sobriety, we have healed that relationship. And, you know, I hurt them while I was drinking. I mean, how could you not? There's a lot of things I did, but I forgave them. They forgave me, and we started over. I could tear up thinking about it. I think I heard you talk about your son and like the sexuality, stuff. And if you weren't sober, you couldn't deal with that. And, same with my parents. It was like they healed their marriage, and then we in turn healed our relationship. And like, I started like reading with my parents. We live in different states, but like once a week we have like a check-in date, and it's beautiful. It's new memories. The past for us is gone. It just is. And like, I wouldn't have that unless I got sober.
Yeah, exactly. It just sounds like so many wonderful things have come into your life.
So many. Yeah.
And the other thing, talking of the word radical, that I've really been working on over the last 12 months or so is radical honesty as well. So
Mm,
there's a book called Radical Honesty, which I actually
okay.
don't recommend, but
Okay.
the concept of it is not just externally being super honest, super authentic, but actually internally to yourself as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably do something similar if you've been
Oh
doing
yeah.
therapy work, but that's
Oh,
been
100%.
powerful.
Yeah, I've never heard that term, but I love it. I mean, it's self-explanatory. That makes so much sense. Yeah, I mean, it was getting honest with the sense that I had a problem. Like that was probably no, not probably the most humbling experience of my life was like because I tried like all so many of us like moderating my drinking. I'd be like, okay, I'll only have it at this. I mean, heck, I used to. I'm so strange. I used to bring home a bottle of wine and pour out half of it, so I'd have the two glasses, but then I'd have the two glasses, get drunk, drive to the convenience store drunk and get more. I mean, it was just insanity. Like I'd set timers so I'd only drink for X amount of time. I mean, I tried so many different ways, and I'd be like, well, I don't struggle with alcohol because I don't drink every day. Those lies that I think we tell ourselves. And yeah, I mean, acceptance was the first step to get me help. Like when it was like, I can't, I can't live like this anymore. I'm about to, alcohol was stealing everything from me. It was stealing my mental health. It was stealing my marriage. It was stealing my career. And it's been unbelievable. It sounds like you did something that's similar when you got similar or sober, you kind of launched it into a whole career, and that's been where I'm at. Like it's crazy. I blog and then I partner with brands like Mended Brands and just make money sharing my story, which is a beautiful thing.
Well, yeah.
It's just, I think a lot of people need to hear that right now. And I think that's why the rise of micro influencing and stuff like that, but with the bent towards mental health and sobriety has been unbelievable. And, if I had never struggled with alcohol, I would never have this career,
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
love it. I
Same here.
love what I'm doing. Yeah.
I mean, I actually, that was never, and I'm sure with you, it's never what I set out to
No,
do, but
no.
it was just that path that seemed to open up. And it was like
Yeah.
the blog turned into a book, and the book turned into 2 books. And
so you're my goals. That's my dream, or something like you're like what I want to be when I grow up.
when you grow up.
But I mean, like, you know, it's, yeah, I mean, I never in a million years would have thought I'd be doing this. I have a bachelor's in communication, so I've always loved to communicate. Like, I love to talk and love people and stuff. So it's kind of just parlayed itself naturally into a career. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my husband and I have talked about it, and he's in the military, so we have like that stable income, and he's like, just try, like, let's see where this takes you, you know, like, who knows? So yeah.
It's amazing, and it's just, I couldn't think of a more rewarding job. Not that it's a job, but that I could be doing, and probably the same with you.
So, oh my gosh, 100%. People are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't know, digital marketing. Like, I'll try to make it, you know, like sound applicable, because I don't know how I feel about influencer, but for lack of a better word, but you know, and I'm like, you know, honestly, I just connect and share my story with people online. And I say, I have 3 goals: is to end the stigma around addiction and mental health, give hope to others that may be struggling, that you know, that recovery is possible, and then educate, because I think you probably see this in your work, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around mental health and like addiction, whatever that looks like for people, and whatever terms we use, but like just misunderstanding. So if I can do those 3 things at the end of the day, then I call it a good day.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I always say HRT, which is actually a treatment for female issues in the UK anyway. But that's not why I say it. Hope, like you said, hope. Make sure people have hope. They can see that there's a way out of this problem. The R is for relationships, so they've got, you know, they trust you. They know that you've got their back. And T is for tactics. Like, I'm going to give you some actual tools that you can use to deal with these things. That's what I always think. HRT.
I love it. I mean, that's exactly what I've been trying to do. And like I always say, I don't have any kind of training, so I just put that out there, you know. But I'm like, I'm just going to share with you what worked for me, you know. So that's what I'll write a blog, or I'll do like a post on meditation or running. Like, I'm a big, you know, advocate. I don't tell people to run, but my big thing is like 20 minutes of activity 3 or 4 times a week. I don't care what it is, like, get out there, you know, it's proven, you know, all the science. And so, you know, it's just more of encouraging people. And I like to show up real. So if I still go through depression, of course, but I'll show people like, here's how I can recover from it. Whereas when I was drinking, it was virtually impossible, you know, to recover.
Exactly. And that's the different thing. Alcohol just keeps you stuck in that infinite loop, and you can't, you know, it feels like you've fallen down a well that you can't get out of.
100%. And you're never like, for me, it was just a survival. I was surviving, right? Like, I would wake up hungover, drink way too much coffee, rush to work, come home, drink. I mean, it was this, then drink because I was sick from, you know, I mean, it was, So, and then I was in therapy, and it's so interesting. I had your experience too, where like my therapist completely missed it. Not that it's their responsibility, but like, nobody questioned, like nobody knew my drinking, psychiatrists, no one, you know, and I have been in that field. And so it just went under the radar for a long time. And even if they did ask, I would lie.
And that's the thing, isn't it?
I went to a doctor's appointment, and, you know, I don't know if they do this in the UK, but they're, you know, you fill out your forms and they're like, how many drinks a week do you have? And I put a big fat 0.
How good does that feel though, to do
Oh my God, it felt so good, because, you know, like, when you would fill them out before, you'd be like, 3 to 4. And I'm like, it's more like 6 to 8 a night, but you know,
but then when you put a 0, you're at the reception desk going, look, it's got a 0.
I did.
Look, that's
really
me.
felt like doing that, you know. Well, I've done that in doctor's appointments. I'm like, I'm 7 months sober. And it's funny, I think in that field, people are starting to see those. That's so good. Like, it's funny, people understand what sobriety means. I think there's definitely a move towards that, which I love. That's why I love sober Instagram or online or whatever, because I think, you know, people are starting to see that living sober doesn't mean boring, doesn't mean can't go out, doesn't mean, if anything, it's like a life of freedom, you know.
And also, I think particularly the younger generation, it's actually quite cool. It's quite a trendy thing to do, is to be sober. It's not the stigma that was once attached to it. It's a lifestyle.
It really is. It is. And it's beautiful. It's like you see so many people that are choosing to be alcohol free and living these amazing lives, you know. And that's why I hope too. I'm like, maybe I could even help people not even have to get to the point where I did. Because I always say too, I'm like, you don't have to hit a low. Because I think a lot of us talk about our lows that we hit before we got help. And I'm like, you know, I identify as an alcoholic. I think you talked about that. And everyone's different, doesn't matter, you know. But I'm
No,
like,
sure.
you don't, you know, terms don't matter. I think to me, I'm like, if alcohol is keeping you from living your best life, then reevaluate your relationship with it. You know, I'm pro sobriety for myself, but I'm like, you don't have to be completely sober. That's not my message. My message is just evaluate and like do the inner work to realize, is alcohol serving me? Like, is it helping
Yeah.
me live my best life? And if it's not, then what do we need to do, or how should I change things, you know?
Yeah, and very similar to you, I say to people, is alcohol in control of you, or are you in
Yeah,
control of it? Just be honest
perfect.
with yourself.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
You mentioned about direct messages on your social media account,
Yeah.
and I'll make sure I share a link as well so
Yeah,
people
please.
can follow you on Instagram and
Yeah.
anywhere else as well, because I'm sure they'll be interested in connecting. But when somebody messages you, maybe you could just give some words of advice from your own experiences, and says to you, like, you know, what do I do in terms of,
Yeah.
you know, I feel stuck, I can't stop drinking. What do you suggest? Look, what would your advice be to somebody in
Yeah,
that
I mean,
position?
I think the first thing I did is, it depends on like where you are, but you know, I tell people like, thank you. First of all, like, be proud of yourself that you're even taking that first step, because we talked about it. That's a huge thing, you know, and humbling experience in itself. And I always tell people, you know, I like to be very upfront. Like, I'm not a therapist, you know, I can't give you medical advice, but I said the first thing I call it modern recovery. I think that might actually be from The Tempest. Do you know The Tempest, or have you heard of them?
Yeah,
Holly Whitaker. So I say I did a blended thing. I did Helly Whitaker, her online school, and then I'm in Laura McCowan. I'm in the Luckiest Club, which is just, it's kind of like AA, just modern. You know, I think it's like $7 a month, you know, something like that. I read This Naked Mind. I mean, so like, I'll just give people like what I did. I give them a list of people to follow on Instagram. I give them some podcasts that I listen to, and then books that I've read, you know.
perfect.
And then I'm blessed. I tell people, you know, insurance, that's a whole, you know, another issue, but I said I got lucky to do outpatient. I said, if you can, I actually recommend it. I think people are scared of it. I did a post about that the other day. I hospitalized myself, but you know, I shared and I was like, it's, you know, I think people get afraid to say they went to outpatient or inpatient, you know, that kind of thing. And I was like, there were all kinds of people in outpatient, like people who definitely had problems, but there were varying degrees. I think we think of people who are on the verge of like death and have nothing else to go to. I said, you know, outpatient can be life changing. I did it 3 times. And I was ashamed of that for a long time, but I was like, you know what? That's actually a superpower. Who can admit that they're like, you know what? I still need to go back. Like, I need help, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I
So,
love that. The only way to deal with shame is to get it out into the
yeah,
light. That's
totally.
what you've got to do.
100%.
But it's interesting. You make a really good point there, because it's one thing to say, I couldn't control my drinking and I quit and now I'm sober. But
Yeah.
it's another thing to say, oh, well, what about I went to rehab, or I went,
Yes.
outpatient, whatever. Because yeah, there's that word again, stigma, and
Right.
all the rest of it. So for you to verbalize that, hopefully will make people think, actually, no,
That's
however, whatever you
exactly.
need.
Exactly. That's what and that's, yeah. And so, yeah. And then I just share, I'm like, you know, I always share this too. I'm like, for me to maintain sobriety and a baseline of mental health, I have to do a lot. Like, I believe in the disease model. That's just what I believe in. Like, I believe that I have to treat that disease daily. Right. So I run and I meditate and I journal and I call a sponsor and I'm in therapy. And like, you know, those things are hard, but at the same time, I'm like, those things can be good for anybody. Like, you
Yeah,
don't have to
right.
be you don't have to be like getting better or managing a mental health condition. But I just tell people, I'm like, it is work. Those are things that I have to do to maintain my sobriety and my mental health, you know. And that's what works, and that's all I can share, you know. And I think And I'm like, I tell people, take pieces of it. Not everyone's going to meditate. Totally understand that. Not everyone's going to run. You know what I mean? But I was like, maybe you can take small things and try. And I said too, it's a process. Like, it's not just something you like know right away. I'm still figuring it out.
Well, yeah, and I'm still learning. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're all on different points in a journey. I don't even know
Yeah.
if the journey's got a destination.
Yeah. I love that. No, I don't think it does. I don't think it does. And like, I'm personally, I like self-development. Like I like to
Yeah,
read.
I
I'm
do.
constantly reading. I'm like, I read like 5 books at once, which probably isn't good, but I'm just, because there's so much I want to read, and so limited time. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a destination. And now that I'm sober, I'm like taking time to learn who I truly am, and then um how to improve that person, right? Like I think you can always improve or change or, all that kind of, and grow.
Yeah, and it took me the first year and a half even to work out who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really
What is
did.
that? I am in that stage right now. I just blogged about that. I was like, how do this is going to come out funny. I can't verbalize it, but I'm like, how do I not know myself? Like I'm with me every day. How do I not know myself? And I know a lot of it had to do with numbing for 10 years. So like there's not introspection, but yeah, I mean, it's so crazy. In sobriety, I'm so different than who I thought I wanted to be.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it totally makes sense.
I
I
had
thought, and
like,
probably like you, I don't know whether this is true or not because I'm
mhm.
speaking for you, but I was very much, I thought I was this extroverted kind of party
Yeah,
animal, had to
yeah,
be the center of
yeah,
attention. And then actually, I quite like reading books and
yeah.
being quite
Staying
quiet.
home. Yeah. I promise you, I have exact same experience. Even to take it further, I had always seen myself, like I worked in politics. I managed like campaigns and did communications and I was a legislative aide and I bring that up because I had thought that I wanted this fast paced, like career where I was in power suits and in DC and all this stuff. And I got that life. Like I did it, ended up in the hospital. And now it turns out that I like working from home.
Yeah,
I like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I still miss people and that's just COVID related, but I'm like, I like my slower pace. I live not in the country, but we have a little bit of land and I swore I would never live in the suburbs, all of that, and I'm like, I love this life. Like it's slower. I work from like 9 to 5 and then I'm done. It's not every day. I don't want to sound like, imperfect, but yeah, I'm completely different than what I thought I wanted. Totally.
it sounds like your life has completely
Oh,
transformed. Just
100%.
amazing. So if
Yeah.
people want to connect with you, what's the best way? You've got a
Yeah.
blog, you're on
Yes.
Instagram.
Yes. So you can follow me on Instagram at C and then Kimbrough. That's KIMBROUGH1. And it's just Instagram. And then my blog is Christina, my first name, and Kimbrough.com.
Okay, and that'll be on the screen right now, even though it's not what I'm pointing, but that'll be on the
Yeah.
screen right now
Oh,
as well.
thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on. Your story is just
Yeah.
inspirational, and
Thank
we'll have to
you.
do another one in
I would love that.
6 months or 12 months to
Yeah.
see where
Yeah.
you're
Like
at.
a
And
post year. Yeah, for sure.
that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Christina, for coming on.